بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه الطيبين الطاهرين. So Usul al-Fiqh, we're going to explain what Usul al-Fiqh is, but I want to give you, inshallah ta'ala, perhaps a way to look at it or a certain perspective from which you can approach it, and then you will find it very beneficial for yourself. This religious knowledge, we want to benefit from it. And so if a person learns anything, he wants to learn something that he benefits from. And when we were in school growing up and we were taking some subjects that we weren't interested in, we said to ourselves, well, what is the benefit of this, algebra or something like that? I'm not even interested, if you weren't interested, because it's not going to do anything for me. So someone might say, well, this usul al-fiqh, didn't you say that it is the knowledge of the Mujtahid, basically? Isn't it how the Mujtahid makes Ijtihad? I'm not a Mujtahid. I'm nowhere close to being a Mujtahid. So what will this knowledge do for me? MashaAllah. What this knowledge can do for you is it can sharpen your mind and sharpen your thinking. Like this, if you take this is the logic of a Mujtahid. So take that reasoning of the Mujtahid and thought of the Mujtahid and the approach of the Mujtahid and incorporate as much of it as you can for yourself. There's certainly things in here that we can't even touch, but we can just hear them and get an idea about them. But there are things in here that actually we can, in principle, we can incorporate that into our own thinking and into our own practices. And inshallah, as we go through, we'll see how is that. Inshallah. So without further ado, for your information, the author is Imam al-Haramain. We're not going to go into his biography too far. You know Imam al-Haramain, he is a great Shafi'i scholar, one of the highest. He is a Mujtahid inside the madhab. It's very high rank. He wrote a booklet, small booklet called Al-Waraqat, the pages, in the science of Usul al-Fiqh. It was said that the first one to author in the science of Usul al-Fiqh was Imam al-Shafi'i himself. Imam al-Shafi'i has a book in Usul al-Fiqh called Al-Risalah. Al-Risalah means the message. So that's the Mujtahid himself. He's giving you what it is, how is he approaching that. Imam al-Haramain, he took this knowledge that Imam al-Shafi'i established, and he summarized it, a very, very great summarization, such that people like ourselves can benefit from it. The author, may Allah have mercy upon him, said, in the name of Allah, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, I author. The author started with the Basmalah, following the example of the great Quran, and applying the hadith. كل أمر ذي بال لا يبدأ ببسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فهو أبتر. Every religiously important matter that does not start with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim is incomplete. So he started, the author, with saying Bismillah. Following the example of the Quran and applying the hadith. That's the two reasons why the scholars start their work with Bismillah. Saying that it's incomplete means it has little blessing. After being content with the Basmalah without the Hamdalah, so he didn't say Alhamdulillah, the author said, thereafter, these are merely a few pages. He expressed himself as such to make it easy on the student and to encourage him. Just as Allah the Exalted said about the obligation of fasting Ramadan أياما معدودات, for a few counted days. It is expressed like that to make it easy for the accountable people and to encourage them and not to discourage them. Meaning, Allah expressed in the Quran the fasting the entire month of Ramadan as fasting for a few days. Like that, Imam al-Haramain said, these are just a few pages to encourage you and not to discourage you. Thus, these pages deal with the chapters of the knowledge of Usul al-Fiqh. A chapter is a group of cases with a common judgment. These chapters benefit the beginners and others. Those who are just learning, they benefit. Those who have learned before, they benefit too, because it's a review for them. The phrase Usul al-Fiqh is constructed from two expressions. The usul, the bases of al-fiqh, detailed judgments. Bases, foundations, fundamentals, maybe rudimentaries perhaps. That has two meanings. Usul al-fiqh, those two words, they have two meanings. One, the first is the linguistic meaning given by the possessive construction of the words. The meaning understood from each of its individual expressions upon annexing one to the other, fixing one to the other, or fusing one to the other. So there's a linguistic meaning there. Usul has a linguistic meaning. Al-fiqh has a linguistic meaning. Both of those two words have their own linguistic meaning. When you fuse them together and say Usul al-Fiqh, then that fusion has its own linguistic meaning. Two, the second is its technical meaning, the name of this science. So we have now an entire science or field of knowledge. The name of that science, the name of that field is Usul al-Fiqh. So that field of knowledge, having that name, is not the linguistic meaning of Usul al-Fiqh. The first meaning, the meaning of the words in their most literal sense, is what he wants to clarify by saying it is composed of two simple parts. Usul al-Fiqh is composed of two simple parts. The phrase Usul al-Fiqh is composed of two simple parts. This means it is arranged from two single units. The first of those units is the word usul. It is a plural whose singular is asl. Asl. The author said about the meaning of asl and asl, foundation, its plural is usul, is something on what other things are built upon, or something that other things are built upon. An asl is something that other things are built upon, such as the foundation of a wall, which is its base, and the base of a tree, which is its end that is firm in the ground. This is the most likely definition of asl because it is confirmed by the senses, as in the examples. Therefore, the usul of fiqh, the bases of fiqh, are its references upon which fiqh is built. That word that I have here, you can pronounce it in two ways. You can say bases, you can say bases. So we're saying here bases with a long E. This is better than the statement of some. The way we defined asl is better than the statement of some. The base is that which is needed. That's how some defined it. Now, one thing that you'll notice here in Usul al-Fiqh is that they want to define something in the most accurate way possible. So whenever they define something, they define it by a process of elimination, by a process of inclusion and elimination. So that by the time they finish including everything they want to include and excluding everything they want to exclude, you can see that thing from every direction. You can envision it from all its sides. He says, this is better than the statement of some, the base is what is needed. He's saying this way of defining usul is weak because you can object to it, you can pull it apart. Because the tree needs its fruit from the perspective of completion, but the fruit is not the base of the tree. So some people might say, like, if this was a normal conversation, someone said a statement, and then you said to them, well, I mean, if you want to say it like that, then you could say this. And then somebody would say, come on, you're nitpicking or whatever. So the scholars you call their nitpicking, and they are being like that, so they don't accept. So you can make a choice that you can accept a person's weak statement or not. That's a life choice. Sometimes you can overlook it, and sometimes you need to say no. You can talk like that if you want to, I don't. This is better than the statement of some. The base is what is that which is needed because the tree needs its fruit from the perspective of completion, but the fruit is not the base of the tree. It is also better than the statement of some. The base is that from which something is. The base is that from which something is. Because 1 can be taken from 10, but 10 is not the foundation of 1. So like that's how the scholars are. There's some scholars, they're called al-muhaqqiqun, or they're called al-mudaqqiqun. That means they are the meticulous ones. Those who are meticulous, those who are verifiers, those who are perfectionists. So then, after defining the base, he digressed and defined its opposite. So he didn't jump right away to define fiqh. He wants to define usulul fiqh, linguistically and technically. So he defined usul by defining usul, which means foundation, bases, fundamentals, roots. Not literally roots, though. It means base more than root. The other part is the word fiqh. So before he went to define the word fiqh, he digressed. Then after defining the base, he digressed and defined its opposite by saying, on the other hand, a fara', a branch, is what is built upon or built on another, such as the branches of a tree in respects to its base. Similar are the offshoots of fiqh in respects to its bases. So it means that you have a base and you have something built upon that base. What is it that we are familiar with? We have learned the obligatory knowledge, or more than that, or less than that. So what we have been exposed to is the branches of fiqh, except just without hearing the word branches. That's all. We just hear the word fiqh. So when we learn wudu, the integrals of wudu and validators of wudu and salah and zakah, etc., all those details, that's fiqh. Or in other words, that's furu'ul fiqh. That's the branches of fiqh, the detailed cases. So those detailed cases, they have a base, and that's what we're learning about now. Similar are the offshoots of fiqh in respects to its bases. Then he got back. He said, Al-Fiqh, which is the second part of the expression Usulul Fiqh, has a linguistic meaning, comprehension, and a religious meaning, which is the knowledge of revelatory rulings, ahkam shar'iyyah, that are established through ijtihad, diligent inquiry. All right. So fiqh is the knowledge of, religiously, is the knowledge of detailed rules that come by way of ijtihad, specifically. This is like knowing the detail of the obligation of the intention in wudu. That's a detail. Because, for example, Abu Hanifa said you don't have to make an intention for wudu. That witr prayer is recommended. According to Abu Hanifa, it's more than recommended. It's wajib. That having the intention at night is a condition for obligatory fast. According to who said so. Others said you can make the intention in the morning. That zakah is obligatory on the money of the child and not obligatory on permissible jewelry, according to who said so. There are those who said otherwise. That killing with a blunt object necessitates execution, and the likes of such detailed particular cases in which there is difference of opinion. When we say there's difference of opinion, means it's not definitively correct. The point itself, that one judgment itself, as an ijtihad of the imam, without looking at the ijma'. Ijma' is always correct. But they might have ijma' about more than one saying. They might have ijma' about two sayings. So that means one of them is correct. Yes, question, go ahead. How would they have ijma' on two sayings? Yes, like when the Sahaba made ijtihad about the iddah of the woman. Is it 3 bleeding cycles, 3 menstrual cycles, or 3 purity intervals? It's this or that. There's no third saying. It's not even permissible to come up with a third saying. Coming up with a third saying will be against the ijma'. Because their entire time passed. The entire era of the Sahaba passed without anyone coming up with a third saying. So that those mujtahids of that era, they came to that, and that whole era passed without anyone coming with anything else. So it became an ijma' that those are the judgments for that case. But can we say which one is definitively correct? Allahu a'lam. If we knew which one was definitively correct, then we would get rid of the other one. As a rule, ijtihad does not invalidate ijtihad. Certainty invalidates ijtihad. Certainty invalidates ijtihad. Also, this is beneficial for you. Ijtihad is something very broad also. When we say ijtihad in the context we're talking about the one who's making ijtihad from the Quran and the Sunnah. But there's other types of ijtihad, because you might make ijtihad for the qibla. That really is ijtihad. When it comes to qibla, you are mujtahid. So you make your own ijtihad. So that means what? Ijtihad has rules. So one principle of ijtihad is that ijtihad does not invalidate ijtihad. That if you made ijtihad to face the qibla, then you came to the same spot another time, made another ijtihad, and you changed your direction. Do you have to make up the old one? You don't. Unless you were sure that you were wrong. If you were certain you were wrong definitively, then you have to make it up. If not, then you don't have to make it up. Those are two sayings. If we were sure which one of them was correct, then the other one would be thrown away automatically, because certainty nullifies ijtihad. Is that clear? Okay, bismillah. Ameen wa fiq. That is different from what is not taken by way of judgment, deduction, ijtihad. By the way, here, this word inquiry that we used, so as a legal term, it's like investigating a case to come up with a judgment. The inquiry is to investigate the case to come up with a judgment. Then we put the word diligent here because ijtihad means to put effort. Literally. Ijtihad is literally an exertion of effort. So if you just pick up a feather, that's not an ijtihad. That is different from what is not taken by way of judgment deduction, such as knowing that the 5 prayers are obligatory. There's no ijtihad involved in that. So that's not called fiqh, according to this definition. And that fornication is forbidden. It is also different from the rules of the creed, like the knowledge about Allah, the glorified and exalted, and his attributes, and the likes of such definitive cases. These matters are not called fiqh because all of that is common knowledge between the elite and the common folk. Thus, fiqh, according to this definition, only applies to the fiqh of a mujtahid. Also, one thing that's nice for you to know is that, and Sheikh Samir mentioned it actually, Usul al-Fiqh is the way of the mujtahid, right? An absolute mujtahid, what makes someone an absolute mujtahid? He has his, Sheikh Samir said it, but he didn't elaborate. He said, if he's an absolute mujtahid, he has his own usul. He has his own usul. So Abu Hanifa, he has his own usul altogether. We're learning usul al-fiqh according to Ash-Shafi'i. What we learned is that you can study, it's possible to study usul, Maliki and Shafi'i usul together because they're close. But you cannot study Shafi'i and Hanafi usul together. What is meant by knowledge in this context is speculation or supposition, or what we will call confidence. That means being sure, although not definitive. Not definitive. It was called knowledge because what is meant is the speculation of the mujtahid, which, because of its strength, is close to knowledge. It's like, for example, you can say to someone, I know, and you mean, I'm very sure. Like, let's say, for example, someone said to you, I'm telling you the truth. You say, I know. Okay. Doesn't mean he could maybe not be telling you the truth, so you're pretty sure about it. By revelatory rulings, we mean what might be called the legal judgments. What is meant by rulings is all of the rulings. What is meant by knowing all of the judgments or all of the rulings is being equipped for that. So what we're saying is an absolute mujtahid is equipped to get to the answer of any religious judgment. He might not know, but we're saying he's equipped. Yani, if he put the effort, inshallah, he can get the answer. Yani, he's qualified to make ijtihad. What is meant by knowing all of the judgments is being equipped for that. Thus, the statement of Malik, radiyallahu anhu, and he is among the greatest of the scholars of fiqh. I do not know, Malik said, I do not know, in response to 32 out of 48 questions, does not negate what we have said. Meaning someone might say, well, you're saying that Mujtahid knows, he knows all the judgments, or that he's equipped to know all the judgments. What about Malik? He's a Mujtahid. He was asked 48 questions, and he did not answer 32 of them. He said, I don't know, to 32 of them. So how equipped is that? He's still equipped. He just didn't think about it. That's all. Because he is equipped with what is needed to reach the knowledge of those issues by contemplation. And they said he wanted to teach the people a lesson also, so that they get accustomed to and find it good to say, I don't know. And also the teacher might do that. You don't have to be a mujtahid to do that. Somebody might ask you a question, you might say, I don't know. I'm not even going to think about it. For the sake of Allah, you do that. Using the term knowledge for this state of being equipped is common. You say, so-and-so knows grammar. And you do not mean that all of its cases are present in his heart to the detail, but that he is equipped for that. Any question?